My granddaughter moved back in with me the summer she turned 26, and I told myself it was going to be fine. I told myself that because I'm the kind of woman who tells herself things are going to be fine even when every bone in her body is screaming otherwise. The night she grabbed my wrist and twisted it so hard I heard something pop. I didn't make a sound. I stood there in my own kitchen holding my breath, waiting for her to let go. And she did, eventually. She always did, eventually. She always did, eventually. But the next morning, when she came downstairs expecting breakfast and found me sitting at the dining room table with two strangers she'd never seen before, that's when her face changed. That's when she understood that my silence the night before hadn't been weakness. It had been a plan. My name is Eunice. Eunice Pemberton. I'm 67 years old, and I live in the yellow craftsman house in Macon, Georgia, the same house I've lived in for 31 years, the same house where I raised my daughter Shelby, the same house where Shelby used to drop off her own daughter, Calle, every Saturday morning when Calle was small, so she could bake with me and watch old musicals and fall asleep on my lap on the sofa. I tell you about the good times first, because you need to understand what I lost. You need to understand that the person who hurt me wasn't a stranger. She was my blood. She was the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms and whisper, "Grammy, will you sing?" And I would sing. I always sang. Kylie's mother, my daughter Shelby, moved to Phoenix with her second husband about 3 years ago. I don't say that with any bitterness. Shelby has her own life. We talk on the phone on Sundays. But Shelby's leaving meant that Calle, who had always been closer to me than to her mother, found herself drifting. She'd had a decent job doing bookkeeping for a small landscaping company in Atlanta. Then the company downsized. Then her apartment lease wasn't renewed. Then her boyfriend, a man I never trusted and never said so, which I regret now, walked out and left her with 3 months of shared debt on a credit card she'd co-signed without telling anyone. She called me in April. "Grammy, I need a place to land, just for a little while, just until I get back on my feet." I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Lord have mercy, I said yes. The first few weeks were like having my Saturday mornings back. She helped me replant the flower beds along the front walk. She found a YouTube channel about sourdough, and we spent an entire rainy afternoon trying to make our first loaf and laughing at the sorry flat thing that came out of the oven. She sat with me on the porch in the evenings, and we'd talk until the fireflies came out. I thought, this is good. This is what family is supposed to feel like. I should have known that anything that starts off feeling like a gift usually comes with something hidden underneath it. By the second month, the job applications had slowed. By the third month, they'd stopped altogether. She started sleeping past noon. She'd come downstairs looking hollowed out, a glass of wine already in her hand before 4 in the afternoon. I'd find bottles in the recycling bin that I didn't remember putting there. 3, 4, 5 in a week. I told myself she was grieving. The job, the boyfriend, the life she thought she was going to have. I gave her space. I made her dinners and left them in the refrigerator without comment. I pretended not to see. Looking back, my pretending was the worst thing I could have done for her. The first time she snapped at me, it was over something so small, I'm almost embarrassed to say it. I'd asked if she wanted me to include her in a grocery run. She was standing at the kitchen counter scrolling on her phone, and when I asked, she didn't look up. She just said through her teeth, "I heard you the first time." I hadn't asked a first time. I'd only asked the once. I let it go. The second time, she told me to stop moving her things. I hadn't touched her things. I let that go too. The third time, she stood in the doorway of my sewing room while I was hemming a quilt for the church auction and told me that my humming was giving her a headache, and could I please just be quiet for once in this house. For once in my house. That one I couldn't entirely let go of. I said quietly, "Calle, honey, I'm not sure that was a kind thing to say." She looked at me. And the look on her face, it wasn't the Calle I knew. It was something older and colder and mean, in a way I didn't recognize. "I'm just being honest," she said. "Isn't that what you always told me to be?" Then she went back to her room and closed the door. I sat there holding the quilt, and I didn't hum another note that evening. The changes came on slow, the way weather does in Georgia in the fall. You don't notice the temperature dropping until one morning you realize you've been cold for weeks and just stopped feeling it. She started coming in late, sometimes past midnight, the smell of something sharper than wine coming off her clothes. She started having phone calls behind her closed door that went loud and then went very quiet. She started asking me for money. At first it was small. $20 for gas, $40 for a prescription she said her insurance hadn't kicked in yet. I didn't ask questions. I just opened my wallet. Then it was larger. "Grammy, I've got a late fee on my car insurance or they're going to cancel it. Can you do 200? Then 3. Then she found the spot on my shelf where I keep a small cash envelope. Pin money, my mother used to call it, money for odds and ends. And one afternoon, I went to it, and it was empty. And she was upstairs, and I just stood there staring at the empty envelope, and I thought, how did we get here? I brought it up at dinner. I said, "Calle, I'm missing some money from the shelf. Do you know anything about that?" She didn't pause, didn't blink, just said, "Maybe you misremembered how much was in there?" I have never misremembered a thing about money in 67 years of careful living. But I let it go because I didn't know what else to do. The night things turned physical started the way those nights always do, with something small, something stupid. A Tuesday night in October. I was running a load of laundry and I'd accidentally put one of her blouses in with a set of red dish towels, and the blouse had come out faintly pink. An honest mistake. I'd done it 100 times to my own things over the years. She came downstairs holding that blouse, and her face was already wound tight the way it got when she'd been drinking. I said, "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, I wasn't paying attention." She threw it at me. Not hard, but she threw it, and then when I reached down to pick it up off the floor, she came close to me, too close, and grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were tight and getting tighter, and she said, with this voice that was absolutely flat, "Stop ruining my things." I heard something pop in my wrist. A small sound. The pain was sharp and hot. I looked at her face and I saw a stranger. She let go and walked back upstairs. Didn't say another word. Didn't look back. I stood there in my laundry room, cradling my wrist, listening to her footsteps above me, listening to the click of her bedroom door, and I stood there so long the washer finished its cycle and beeped at me twice. I didn't cry until I got to the bathroom. I turned the water on so she wouldn't hear. I sat on the edge of my bathtub for a long time that night. My wrist was already swelling, a tender, puffy swelling along the outside. I held it under cold water and looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. 67 years old, gray hair. I keep in a short natural, reading glasses on a chain around my neck. I looked like someone's grandmother, which is what I am, and I'd just been hurt by that someone's child. The shame hit first, hot and specific. I thought about what the ladies at my church would say. About what Shelby would say, about what it meant that I had let things get this far. Then the shame cooled into something harder, something that didn't have a name yet but was forming itself in the back of my mind like dough coming together. I thought of my mother. She raised 4 kids in Bibb County with no car and a husband who worked 2 jobs and was kind and tired and barely home. She used to say, "Eunice, a woman who lets someone walk on her isn't being loving. She's being convenient." I was 9 years old when she said that, and I didn't understand it. I understood it now. I dried my wrist. I wrapped it carefully with an ace bandage I keep in the bathroom closet. I looked in the mirror one more time, and the woman looking back at me was not crying anymore. She was thinking. I went to the kitchen. Not to sleep. I wasn't going to sleep that night. I put the kettle on and I sat at my kitchen table and I thought with complete clarity for the first time in months, which is what happens, I suppose, when the pretending finally stops. I thought about my options the way you inventory a pantry, honestly, without sentimentality. Option 1, do nothing. Wrap my wrist, say I fell. Calle wakes up, maybe apologizes in that halfway, sideways way she'd been apologizing lately. I shouldn't have done that, but you know how stressed I've been. And I say it's okay the way I always say it's okay. And we go back to the eggshells. And then what? Another month of this, another blouse, another empty cash envelope, another night where she grabs something she can't take back. Option 2, ask her to leave. But my granddaughter, with nowhere to go, no job, a drinking problem she won't name. I put her out onto the street, and then what? I spend the rest of my life wondering which ditch she ended up in. Option 3 was the only one that made sense, the only one that was actually love rather than just the appearance of love. It was the hardest option. It was the one that was going to break both of our hearts before it fixed anything. The kettle whistled. I made myself a cup of constant comment, extra strong, and I went to the living room and I picked up my phone. It was 11:30 at night. I called Adelaide first. Adelaide Marsh has been my next-door neighbor for 22 years. Before she retired, she spent 30 years as a licensed clinical social worker specializing in family crisis intervention. First for the county, then for a private practice she ran out of an office on Riverside Drive. She knows more about the mechanics of family dysfunction than anyone I've ever met, and she has never once in our friendship used that knowledge to make me feel small. She picked up on the second ring. Eunice, that was all. Just my name. But the way she said it. "I need your help," I said. It went further tonight. She hurt me. I heard her exhale. Not with surprise, with the weight of someone who has been waiting for a phone call and is grieving that it finally came. "How bad?" she asked. "My wrist. I don't think it's broken. I think it's a sprain. I'm going to ask you something and I need an honest answer. Are you safe right now? She's upstairs asleep." "Okay." A pause. "Eunice, we've talked about this." "I know." "You knew it was getting worse." "I know. What do you want to do?" And that was Adelaide's gift. Not telling me what to do. Asking me what I wanted, because she understood that I'd spent months feeling like I had no choices. And the first thing she always did was give them back to me. I told her what I was thinking. The whole plan, as much of it as was formed. She was quiet while I talked. When I finished, she said, "I'll be there at 9. And Eunice, you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing the only thing left." Then I called my son-in-law's sister, Paulette. I know that sounds sideways, my daughter's husband's sister, but Paulette Hendricks is an attorney in Macon and has been a friend to me since before Shelby and Marcus got married. She handles estate law mostly, but she knows every person in the Bibb County legal and social services system, And more importantly, she knows how to walk into a room and make people feel the full weight of what they've done without raising her voice. Paulette didn't ask a lot of questions. She said, "I've got a 9 o'clock, but I can move it." "You sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "Then I'll be there." I made one more call to the non-emergency line for Bibb County. The officer I spoke with was patient and calm, and when I explained what had happened, my granddaughter in my home, the escalating pattern, the incident tonight, she connected me to a domestic violence advocacy coordinator named Marcus, who spoke with me for nearly 40 minutes. He explained my options clearly. He explained what documentation I'd need. He asked if I wanted a patrol officer present the following morning. I said yes. Then I hung up and sat in the quiet of my living room for a while. Just me and the sound of the mantel clock and the October wind outside. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. I didn't go back to bed. I was too far into what I was feeling to sleep, and there were things I needed to do with my hands, or I'd lose my nerve. I went to the kitchen and I started cooking. I make a baked French toast casserole that my mother used to call company breakfast. It's the kind of thing you'd set out for a Sunday after church, when you want the table to look like you've been awake for hours getting everything just right. Thick brioche bread soaked overnight in a custard of eggs and cream and a touch of vanilla and brown sugar. Baked until it's golden and puffed and the whole house smells like the best version of a morning you've ever had. I made that. I also made a fruit salad, cut strawberries, blueberries, honeydew in careful small pieces, a little mint from the pot on my windowsill. I made a carafe of coffee. I got out my company dishes, white with a thin rim of cobalt blue, and set them on the table with cloth napkins and the good silver I keep in the buffet drawer. I thought about what I was doing. I was setting a table for a verdict. I set 4 places, one for me at the head, one for Adelaide to my right, one for Paulette to my left, and one for Calle at the far end, facing me, facing all of us. At around 2 a.m, while the casserole was in the refrigerator soaking, I went to my sewing room. I have a small wooden box on the 3rd shelf where I keep things that matter to me. Not jewelry, nothing valuable in the way a pawn shop would understand, but things that are valuable in the way that only I understand. I opened the box and took out a photograph. It was taken 15 years ago at Kylie's 11th birthday party. We'd had it in the backyard. Her mother had made a lopsided chocolate cake. Calle was wearing a paper crown, and she was looking at the camera with this enormous, delighted grin. Gap-toothed because she'd lost 2 molars that summer, and I was right next to her, one arm around her shoulders, laughing at something off-camera. I don't know who we were in that photograph. The distance between that afternoon and this one felt like 100 years of weather. I put the photo back. I couldn't afford to go soft. Not tonight. I went back to the kitchen and sat in my chair and waited for morning. At 7:30, I heard the shower running upstairs. At 7:55, I heard her footsteps on the stairs, slow, tentative. She always moved carefully the morning after a bad night, like she was navigating ice, like she was trying to determine from a safe distance whether there was going to be a scene. There was going to be a scene, just not the kind she was expecting. She appeared in the doorway of the dining room and stopped. I had put on my good dress, the one I wear to funerals and important occasions, a deep plum-colored wrap dress that my daughter picked out for me 2 Christmases ago. I'd done my hair. I was wearing pearl earrings. I was sitting at the head of my table with my hands folded and my back straight, and on the table in front of me was the most beautiful breakfast I'd made in years. She looked at the table. She looked at the 4 place settings. She looked at me. "Grammy." Her voice was careful, uncertain. "Good morning," I said. "Sit down, sweetheart. I've made company breakfast." She came into the room slowly, like she was reading something she couldn't quite make out. She pulled out the chair at the far end of the table and sat down. She was wearing an oversized sweatshirt and jeans, her hair still damp. She looked young. She looked like she hadn't slept well. She looked, for a moment, like my Calle. I held on to the steel in myself. She reached for the coffee carafe and said almost lightly, "Are we expecting someone?" "Yes," I said. She looked up at me. Something shifted behind her eyes. "Who?" The doorbell rang. I pushed back my chair slowly, smoothing my dress, and I walked to the front door without hurrying. I heard her behind me, the scrape of her chair, her quick footsteps in the hall. I opened the door. Adelaide stood on my porch in a gray linen blazer and dark slacks, her silver hair pulled back, her expression the particular kind of calm that only comes from 30 years of doing hard things. Next to her was Paulette, in a dark green blazer, her reading glasses on top of her head, her briefcase at her side. Behind them, on the front walk, was a uniformed officer from Bibb County, a woman of about 40 with a calm, professional manner, and a younger officer beside her. I looked at Adelaide. She looked at my wrist, wrapped in the ace bandage, and the thin cardigan I'd pulled over it. Her jaw tightened. She looked at my face. She gave me the smallest nod. "Come in," I said. "Breakfast is ready." They filed in. I led them to the dining room. Calle was standing in the doorway, not in her chair anymore, one hand on the doorframe. She saw Adelaide. She'd met Adelaide before. We'd had her over for dinner twice. A neighbor. Fine. Then she saw Paulette. Paulette, who she knew was an attorney, who she knew had something to do with my legal affairs. Then she saw the uniform. The color left her face the way water leaves a bathtub, fast, all at once, and then just gone. "Grammy." Her voice came out small. "What is this?" I didn't answer right away. I went to my chair and sat down. Adelaide took the seat to my right. Paulette took the seat to my left. The officer stood in the doorway. "Sit down, Calle," I said. She didn't sit. She held on to the doorframe and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, not arrogance, something younger than that, something closer to the truth of what she'd become. I didn't. "Grammy, last night it wasn't—" "Sit down," I said again, quietly, and this time she did. Adelaide spoke first. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. 30 years of crisis work had given her a kind of gravity that made raising her voice unnecessary. "Calle," she said, "I've known your grandmother for over 20 years. I've watched her give of herself to this family, to your mother, to you, in ways that most people would have stopped long ago. What I want you to understand, right now, this morning, is that what happened in this house last night was not a family disagreement. It was assault, and it has a history." Calle opened her mouth. Adelaide held up one finger. "Not harsh, just final. When you're ready to listen, I'll know. Until then." Calle closed her mouth. Paulette set her briefcase on the floor and folded her hands on the table. She looked at Calle with the patient, evaluative look of someone who has spent a long time in courtrooms. "I'm not here in any official capacity this morning," she said. "I'm here as your grandmother's friend. But I want you to hear me clearly. The officer behind me is here in an official capacity. Your grandmother contacted the county last night. There is a report. What happens from this point forward depends very largely on the choices you make in the next hour." Kylie's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "Grammy, please, I'm going to talk now, I said. And I did. I had spent 31 years in this house, keeping my voice down, keeping the peace, keeping things gentle. But what came out of me that morning was not gentle, and I'm not sorry for it. I told her about the cash envelope. I said the number out loud, $80 taken without asking, twice that I'd noticed. I told her about the wrist. I pulled back my cardigan sleeve and showed her the bandage and the bruising already showing above it. I told her about the months of small cruelties, the humming, the grocery run, the blouse, not because I thought they were equal to the physical harm, but because I needed her to understand that physical harm doesn't start from nowhere. It is built, brick by brick, from all the smaller permissions you give a person. She was crying before I was halfway through, not performatively. Not the kind of tears designed to make me stop. Quiet tears, the kind that come when something in a person finally breaks in the right direction. I didn't stop. I kept going. I have loved you every day of your life, I said. I loved you when you were small and easy to love, and I loved you when you were difficult, and I had to work to remember why. I loved you last night, even while you were hurting me. A grandmother's love doesn't have an off switch, Calle. I want you to know that. But love is not the same thing as permission. What I gave you for these past months was not love. It was fear wearing love's clothes. And I am finished being afraid in my own home, she said through tears. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I know that, I said. But that's the nature of this kind of bad. It never announces itself. It just grows. Adelaide spoke again. She explained in clear and concrete terms what resources were available. A women's outpatient substance abuse program about 4 miles from downtown Macon. A sliding scale therapist she knew personally. A transitional housing program for young adults in crisis. Not a shelter, she said carefully, but a structured environment with support staff, while Calle got stable enough to make real plans. Paulette set a single sheet of paper on the table. This is a voluntary agreement, she said. Your grandmother has agreed not to pursue criminal charges in exchange for your agreement to enter the outpatient program and vacate this residence by the end of the week. The officer's presence this morning is to document the conversation, not to arrest you. That can change. Calle looked at the paper. She looked at me. Grammy, she said, and her voice was so small, it nearly broke me. I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. And I meant it. I believed her. But believing someone's sorry and trusting them with your safety are two completely different things, and I had spent too long confusing the two. Will you? Are we? She couldn't finish the sentence. I looked at her. My granddaughter. The girl who used to fall asleep on my lap. We are not done with each other, I said slowly, but we are done with this version of us. This is done. She signed the paper that morning. By Thursday afternoon, she had moved her things to the transitional program on Forsyth Street. She texted me when she arrived. Just, I'm here. I'm okay. Thank you, Grammy. I sat on my porch and read that text about 10 times. The evening was cool. The maple at the edge of my yard was turning, finally, the leaves going orange and gold the way they do in October, when we're lucky with the weather. I had a cup of tea going cold in my hand because I kept forgetting to drink it. I thought about what I had done. I thought about all the ways it could have gone differently. I thought about the girl in the paper crown. Then I thought about the bandage on my wrist, and I thought about my mother's voice. A woman who lets someone walk on her isn't being loving, she's being convenient. And I thought, no, I did the right thing. The hardest thing and the right thing. Those two are often the same. The weeks that followed were the strangest kind of quiet. The house, which had been full of tension for months, was suddenly just full of space. I'd walk into a room and there'd be no one to brace for. No listening for footsteps. No reading the atmosphere when I heard the stairs creak. I could hum in my sewing room. I could leave $20 on the shelf. I could run a load of laundry without my stomach tightening. I won't pretend it wasn't lonely. It was. There were evenings I sat at that dining room table and looked at her empty chair and felt the absence like weather. But lonely is not the same as afraid. I had forgotten in those months that they were two different things. I was relearning. I saw my own doctor about the wrist. A moderate sprain, she said, no fracture. She wrapped it properly. She asked how it happened. I told her the truth. She didn't blink. She gave me a number for a family trauma support group that meets on Wednesday evenings at a church on Bineville Avenue. I've been 3 times. The people there are tired in familiar ways, and that is its own kind of comfort. I called Shelby. That was the hardest phone call. Telling your daughter that her daughter hurt you. Shelby cried. She blamed herself. I told her she wasn't allowed to do that. None of this was hers to carry. She wanted to fly back to Macon. I told her not yet. I said, let Calle do her work. Let me do mine. Shelby said, you're the strongest person I know, Mama. I said, Shelby, I am 67 years old, and I spent 3 months too scared to hum in my own house. I am not strong. I am just finally awake. Calle called me on a Sunday afternoon, 6 weeks into her program. I was in the garden, turning the beds over for winter, my hands in the dirt the way I like them. My phone buzzed on the porch railing. I saw her name and I sat down on the steps before I answered, which tells you something about how I still felt about those calls. Grammy. Her voice sounded different, cleaner somehow, the way a room sounds after you've opened all the windows. Hi, sweetheart. I'm calling because my counselor said I should. Not because I have to. I want to. A pause. I've been doing a lot of work on why I am the way I got to be, and I keep coming back to the same thing. I kept thinking I was entitled to you. Like you were mine in a way that meant you'd absorb anything I threw at you and still be there. Her voice wavered. I learned that word in group. Entitled. And it sounds so ugly when I say it out loud. It is ugly, I said. But ugly doesn't mean unfixable. Grammy, I'm so ashamed. I know you are. I want to make it right. You're already making it right, I said. You're on the phone. You're in the work. That's making it right. I paused. But Calle, I have to tell you something and I need you to hear it as love, because that's what it is. Okay. We're going to take this very slowly. There is no coming back to this house the way it was. The door isn't locked to you forever, but it's locked for now, and the key is time and accountability, not just sorry. You understand? A long quiet. Then, yeah, I understand. Good. I'll talk to you next Sunday. Same time. We hung up. I sat on my steps a while longer with my dirty hands and my cooling tea and the sound of my own maple dropping its leaves. The afternoon light was the particular low gold of late autumn, the kind that makes everything look a little bittersweet and a little beautiful at the same time. I thought about what it cost to love someone honestly instead of desperately. I thought about all the mornings I'd spent walking on eggshells when I could have been walking in my garden. Not anymore. It's been 8 months now. Calle finished her outpatient program and has started working part-time at a pet supply store and is renting a room from a woman she met through her sober community. She texts me on Sundays. We meet at a coffee shop on Riverside Drive every other Saturday. A place with good scones and big windows and neutral ground where we're learning. slowly and carefully, what it means to be family to each other in a way that's honest and of just habitual. It's not what I had. What I had was a grandfather clock and a paper crown and a girl who loved musicals and fell asleep on my shoulder. I mourn that. I don't think I'll ever stop mourning that. Not entirely. But what I have now is real. It has weight. It has truth in it. And I've learned that a relationship built on truth, even a hard truth, even a truth that cost both of you something enormous, that's the kind of relationship that can actually hold. My wrist healed completely. There's no pain left. My house is mine again. On Wednesday nights, I sit with tired people at the church on Vineville Avenue, and I listen, and I tell my own story. And sometimes someone newer to all of this will look at me and say, "How did you know when enough was enough?" And I tell them what my mother told me about the difference between being loving and being convenient. And I tell them about the morning I sat at my own dining room table in my good dress and waited for the doorbell to ring. And I tell them the hardest thing and the right thing are usually the same. You'll know which is which because the right thing is the one that makes you shake before you do it and breathe after. If you've been in this kind of situation, with a child, a grandchild, anyone you love enough to let hurt you, I hope you know you're not alone in it. I hope you know that love without limits isn't love. It's surrender. And you deserve more than that. You deserve to hum in your own kitchen. Tell me what city you're listening from. And if this story reached you somewhere real, please leave a like. It helps me bring more stories like this to people who need them. There are other stories on the screen right now, and I think you'll find yourself in some of them. Thank you for being here with me today. I've been sitting with this story for 8 months now, turning it over the way you turn a stone in your hand, feeling every edge of it, every rough spot. And the thing I keep coming back to is how long I let it go on. Not because I didn't see it. I saw it. I just kept choosing the easier pain over the harder one. That's the thing nobody tells you about situations like mine. The hardest part isn't the moment it turns physical. The hardest part is every ordinary morning before that, when you had a choice, and you chose silence because silence felt like kindness. I told myself I was protecting Calle. I told myself she was grieving, struggling, that she just needed more time. But what I was really doing, and I know this now, is that I was protecting myself from a truth I wasn't ready to face. That my love, as real and as deep as it was, had become something she was using to excuse herself. And every time I excused her, I handed her another permission slip. That's the cause and effect nobody wants to name out loud. When we absorb someone's cruelty without consequence, we don't soften them. We teach them the cruelty has no cost. I didn't make Calle this way. Her pain made her this way. The losses she hadn't learned to carry. But I made it easier for her to stay this way, month after month, because I kept showing up with dinner and forgiveness and the signal that nothing she did would change my presence in her life. The morning I called Adelaide, I wasn't being brave. I want to be honest about that. I was terrified. My hands were shaking when I dialed. I second-guessed myself 3 times before the call connected. What stopped me from hanging up wasn't courage. It was the memory of my wrist popping. That small sound. I couldn't unhear it. And I couldn't keep pretending it hadn't happened. What I learned about moral clarity is that it doesn't usually arrive as a thunderclap. It arrives as a small, undeniable sound in a quiet laundry room. It arrives when you finally run out of excuses that feel good enough to repeat. Adelaide used to say that intelligence without honesty is just clever self-deception, and I think that's right. I had been very clever about my situation for a very long time. I had constructed an entire story around it. She's struggling, she needs me, this is what family does. And that story was a lie I'd made so comfortable I'd been living in it like a house. What Calle needed wasn't more of my forgiveness. She needed the one thing I'd been withholding. The truth about what she had become. Delivered with enough love and enough structure that she actually had a chance to change. That's what the breakfast table was. Not revenge. Not punishment. It was the first honest thing that had happened between us in months. And the outcome, as hard as it's been, is the proof. She's sober. She's working. She texts me on Sundays. We sit across from each other at a coffee shop every other weekend, and we're learning how to be real with each other instead of just habitual. That didn't come from my silence. It came from the morning I stopped being convenient and started being truthful. I am 67 years old, and I learned this late. I wish I hadn't. But I'd rather learn it late than die, still humming quietly so no one gets upset.